Hey everybody, this is Matthew Soltesiak, and you're listening to Not the Same Old Lions podcast, part of the Minute Media Podcast Network. This season, it's all grit. I speak with a variety of guests and interview key players, gaining more insight on what makes this team go. The Detroit Lions are now in a new, grittier era, and we look beyond just the kneecaps when it comes to the analysis. Welcome to another episode. In this episode, we previewed the Detroit Lions Week 14 rematch with the Green Bay Packers. The Lions won at Lambeau already this year, like last year, but hope to avoid a repeat of a home loss like last year. So we'll take a closer look at the Packers, discuss the state of the Lions, as well as hear from a reporter who covers Green Bay. That and more. Let's get to it, Lions fans.
Hey everyone, this is Lomas Brown, and you're listening to Not the Same Old Lions podcast.
Joining me today is Coach Jerry Angers, a former Michigan High School Coach of the Year. He was also named Coach of the Week by the Detroit Lions. He's the current scouting and training director for Bull Rush Sports. Coach, good to have you here on this preview episode.
Great to be here, fellas, with a snowy evening in northern Michigan.
Snowy it is outside through a lot of the state, at least the northern part of it. Joining both of us is James Cook, senior sports writer for Traverse City Record Eagle. You can also hear him on the Get Around podcast that drops on Mondays. James, good to have you here as well.
Yeah, good to be here. Just got done shoveling the driveway for the first time.
It is that time of year. It is December. It also means it's the last, 28% of the football season. And I don't want to say one game matters more than all because they're all equally divided, but they matter. So let's get into some final reflections from the last game. Kindle Vildor, there's a guy that's gotten a lot of heat by Lions fans. And I want to say last week, there's a pass interference call on him late in the game. And I've heard from a few that I thought it wasn't the best call. It was a weak call, and I'm not going to fault him too much for that. But I also want to point out there was a play earlier in the game, like on second down, a screen pass, and he blew that thing up. And if I remember correctly, it forced like a 3rd and long. It may have forced an out. And so I just want to say, he's not our starting defensive back. For where he's at, I'm very happy with the effort he has put in and the play he has put in, and I'm thankful we've got somebody like him that far down the depth chart. James, are you seeing things like that?
Yeah, I mean, when he had to play at first, he struggled kind of mightily, but he's kind of stabilized himself in that game last week. He was pretty solid, I thought. I think part of the difference was that he wasn't asked to be the number one corner in that game like he was the one before it, where Terry Arnold was back, so he could be the number 2 guy. Asking him to cover somebody else's number 1 receiver is a bit of a big ask, but number 2 he seemed to be a lot more comfortable with and had I thought a pretty productive game.
Yeah. So again, that depth part, and some of these guys are gonna have to step up at certain times when the starters are not in there. Another thing interesting we talked about in the last episode was how the Lions had so many fewer yards rushing in the second half. Dan Campbell talked about that, and he said, you know what? A lot of drives stalled out quickly, and in general, they didn't have a lot of plays, Coach, and that worked really well into the opponent's, the Bears' game plan by keeping the Lions' offense off the field. So 194 yards or whatever it was still a really good number. It's just when you see so many yards in that first half, you get a little frustrated by the second half numbers, but the game moves and flows and spurts, doesn't it?
Oh, there it is. I mean, we talk about it. 3 and out is huge. 3 and out, that's only 3 plays you have. You probably ran 2 and threw 1. You look at Jamo's penalty again. I hate to bring that up again, but those are all things that are drive killers. And those, I can't remember exactly the field because we've moved on that in the Jamo penalty, but maybe we have rushed for 40 more yards after that play. The fumble, that was closer to the end zone. But so that's what happens. And, when that momentum flips, as soon as that momentum flips like that, things start to go bad. Things start to go haywire. And I think the Lions were in survival mode because it was like when we weren't on offense, we were losing people on defense. And I think we were just trying to survive. And again, they did. So.
Yeah, and you brought the JMO penalty, and guys, I don't know if you saw the clip on social media because obviously in real time and watching it, I couldn't go back. I believe it was Tyreek Stevenson on the sideline is the guy who he threw the ball at, and great aim on JMO's part. I got to give him some credit on that. I mean, it was an on-target throw. So maybe in addition to Sewell throwing the ball, we might see JMO throw the ball. But it looked like Tyreek Stevenson intentionally tried to trip him as he was coming off the field there. And that's just not cool. And obviously we know, everybody knows it's the second player who gets the penalty. It's just so frustrating because another person instigates it. And so, so that is what that is. I'm looking forward to JMO having a great game this week. And I've got, I got a lot of confidence in him and his abilities and his growth as a person from last year to this year. And so that I just thought it was interesting that Tyreek Stevenson was the guy. And then if those of you don't recognize the name, I believe that is the same guy who did not exactly play the play of the Hail Mary in Washington where his team lost. And so he tries to trip one of our players, his team loses too. So I don't know. James, you have something you wanted to add about the Thanksgiving Day game?
Yeah, I don't know if Stevenson will be getting a little bit of a bill from the NFL for that or not, but it's a possibility. I think that he could get a little bit of a fine there because there is an angle on that where it's pretty obvious that he stuck his leg out and was trying to trip Jamison Williams. So Williams shouldn't have reacted the way he did, get the personal foul, but Stevenson obviously shouldn't have done what he did. Yeah, it's interesting that it's Campbell's first win on Thanksgiving Day, and it came exactly 4 years to the day that Matt Patricia and Bob Quinn were fired.
What an anniversary! What a way to celebrate that.
Yeah, and Campbell
yeah.
scored a touchdown on Thanksgiving for the Lions back in 2006.
All right, nice stat find there. Another one is we all know the Lions did lose the turnover battle in this game, 1-0, but they still won. And you know what? It might not seem like a big deal, Coach, but that's what good teams do, right? I mean, it's easy to say, "Oh, we won the game because we beat them with 3 turnovers to 0 or 2 turnovers to 1." But when you lose the turnover battle, that makes it harder for you to win the game, obviously. But that's what good teams can do. And I think that's just one more thing to point out to the Lions. Not only were they battling, they lose the turnover battle, they were battling injuries, which we'll get into in a minute. But that's got to give you a great feeling there on the quality of the team when, even if it's 1-0, you still lost it at a critical time. It was a change, but the Lions withstood it all.
Yeah. Sudden changes are huge, and the big thing is you turn the ball over, do we stop them on defense? They turn the ball over, do we score right away? Those are things that you're always looking to. That's, we just call them sudden change. And if you can lose that battle but still win the game, that's pretty good shape. One away, one apart, 1-0, 2-1, 3-2, stuff like that's probably not as much, but
Sure.
it's still a positive in that instance. And again, somewhere along the line, somebody else picked up what happened in that situation and protected us for it. Whether it was a punt or defense or what, things like that. So that's just good. It's just good stuff. And that's the team game we're seeing every day when we watch them.
All right. Well, let's move on to the state of the team because there's a lot to talk about, man. Injuries. It seems like a broken record. It's just the life, the reality of the NFL season, and the Lions are definitely not immune to it. The defense seemed to be much more heavily impacted than the offense right now. As we know, Malcolm Rodriguez and Wingo are now out for the season with injuries. Pascal and Levi are day-to-day, Coach Campbell said, but he's not too optimistic about either of those guys playing on Thursday. Mosley, though, Emmanuel Mosley, he said, should be good to go. He was a late-time decision to not play last week. And then he said Taylor Decker's looking better, but it's still going to come down to the wire on that. I think that's a crucial one right there, is if Taylor Decker can be back at left tackle for this game. So we'll talk about those injuries. And then it was Black Friday. There's Cyber Monday. The Detroit Lions went practice squad shopping this weekend, guys, and they loaded up. They filled that cart up, and they went down like multiple aisles because you got Quan Alexander, a linebacker from Denver. Dan Campbell and Aaron Glenn know him from their New Orleans days. Miles Adams, a defensive lineman from Seattle, and Jonah Williams, a defensive lineman from Minnesota, I believe. And they're all brought over to the practice squad. David Long and Ezekiel Elliott are linebackers who were signed earlier this month that are already contributing. James, give us a little more insight on who some of these guys are, and what do you know about some of these guys?
Yeah, they also signed Jamal Adams today, safety he was with the Tennessee Titans, former Pro Bowl player. He had asked the Titans for his release so that he could sign with a contender um, after their rough start. Traditionally, he's been a safety, but it can also play linebacker, which is interesting. I think that's kind of what the plan is for him, is kind of a hybrid safety linebacker, a lot like Iffy was last season when he was
Okay.
his most. So I think that kind of says that they don't expect Iffy to play this season. Um,
Oh.
but the interesting thing though was he asked for his release from the Seattle the year before because they wanted to move him to linebacker.
There's some irony
But
there.
but I guess being unemployed might change that opinion. So he's great in the blocks and as a blitzer, not a plus guy in coverage anymore like he was earlier in his career. First round pick by the Jets back in 2017. Um,
Okay.
like a lot of guys on the Lions, he has a long injury history, or not really long, but he has an injury history. He tore a labrum in his shoulder in 2021, right quad tear in 2022, and a knee strain in 23. But I mean, he was all pro in 2019, not just Pro Bowl, all pro, which is the more exclusive one.
Yep.
And, he's got almost 500 tackles, 21 and a half sacks for a safety in his career, and seven forced fumbles. So he's somebody who can play. He actually overlapped with Quan Alexander at LSU for a season. So those two guys probably know each other decently well.
All right, that might help them as they both get familiar with the team. What do
Yeah.
you
So
have
then
on Jonah Williams?
yeah, he's a big defensive end, kind of similar to Pascal. I think they're just looking for somebody to replace Pascal for a couple weeks. 6'5", 275, so he's a big end that can set the edge. He's played 48 games in the NFL, 22 starts. Almost all of that's with the Rams. So he's a guy that Brad Holmes would have signed for the Rams as an undrafted free agent in 2020, right before he left for Detroit. Um, Only has 2.5 sacks in his career, so I don't know how much of a pass rush he's going to add, but I think he's a pretty good run defender, and I think that's what they want first. He also was briefly with the Vikings this season and played one game with them. So maybe he can give a little bit of insight for that last game of the season on them.
Okay, and also on the defensive line is Miles Adams, right? What do you got on this guy?
Another similar guy to Pascal, 6'2", 290, big defensive end who's known mostly for being a good run stopper and not much of a pass rusher. He's only got one career sack in 26 games, um, all with Seattle over 4 years. He started one game. Interestingly enough, he played against the Lions in the game earlier this year with Seattle, and all of his tackles this season were in that game against Detroit. Uh, um, and also another tie-in with him is that he was a college teammate of Jack Fox's at Rice.
Small world. All right, well, let's wrap it up with Quan Alexander, the former teammate of Mr. Jamal Adams. What do you have on Quan Alexander, who might be one of the more intriguing guys we just grabbed?
He is. I mean, he's I think what a three-time Pro Bowler. So I mean, he's a guy who was one-time Pro Bowler in 2017. But I mean, he led the NFL in solo tackles in 2016 in his second year in the league. 108 solo tackles in the NFL and 145 total for the season. That is a crazy number. He was a Pro Bowler the next year, where he had about 100 tackles and 3 interceptions in 12 games. Um, but he has an incredibly long injury history. 2018, tore his left ACL, missed 10 games. 2019, tore his pec, missed 8 games, came back for them in the playoffs, and tore his biceps in the playoffs and played with it.
Wow.
had a high ankle sprain where he missed 4 games in 2020, and then tore his Achilles later that season, his right Achilles. Tore his left Achilles last season. So
Okay, so he's
he's
probably
had
working his way back from that Achilles still.
Yeah, he had been up for a few games this year. So with the Broncos. So he has played. I think he's gotten something like 65 snaps in this year.
Hmm.
So he's gotten into game action. He's played regular downs, he's not a special teams guy much anymore. He used to be early in his career, uh but I think he probably could do it if they needed him to.
All right. I mean,
And he's
obviously he's seen game action, so but working his way back, because even when you're healed, you still got to get in the rhythm of the game.
Right. Yeah. So he's seen game action. So he's back into it. I don't think that it'll take too long to get him back in. And he's a good coverage linebacker. So I think he's basically a replacement for Jalen Reeves-Maybin.
If you're a maintenance supervisor for a commercial property, you've had to deal with everything from leaky faucets to flickering light bulbs. But nothing's worse than that ancient boiler that's lived in the building since the day it was built, 50 years ago. It's enough to make anyone lose their cool. That's where Grainger comes in. With industrial-grade products and dependable fast delivery, Grainger can help with any challenge, from worn-out components to everyday necessities. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Okay, great. Coach, I mean, these are guys you got off other people's practice squads, so you got to, I don't want to say temper your expectations, but you have to be realistic about the additions to the roster. Obviously, the Lions are scouting guys that can fill in, that can contribute, Dan Campbell said it's kind of nice having some veterans come in that can plug and play. He said, practice squad, you got to balance. You have some guys you're developing, but other guys that have been around for a little bit. Many of these guys have an injury history, which is why they might be on practice squads versus active rosters right now. But, the Lions didn't, Brad Holmes did not waste any time. He went and got active. What do you see in any of these guys jump out at you, or just what's your thought on this philosophy?
Well, I love it. I mean, and he said the thing too. You get veterans with the young guys. I mean, we got a lot of young guys. We got young guys doing things that hurt the team a little bit in certain situations, and so to have these guys, plus you got guys that are trying to stay in the league. They're not going to go through the motions, and they're these guys that how many opportunities have they had to go to a Super Bowl or the possibility of going to a Super Bowl? Not that that's our plan. And I think that's huge. The other thing too is the two bigger guys. Those we need those DNs that can push that pocket, that can keep guys in, that don't let our guys don't let the quarterback run out and get outside. Don't let the running back bounce outside. And I think that's what each and every one of these guys. This guy's earmarked for 12 plays a game. This guy's earmarked for 22 plays a game. And if because of veterans, if it ends up, oh my God, he's got to play 36, they're going to feel comfortable with it. So we know that, you guys. We've been talking about it all year how AG is always putting these packages together. Well, each one of these guys is going to have a package by their strength, and it's going to shine long last week, right? It's going to shine. And I think, James did a great job on that with that. And again, those injuries and stuff, hey, can he get any more? No. All those guys can get hurt anymore.
Dan Campbell was asked about injuries, and over a couple different press conferences, and one he was like, "Listen, it is what it is. You just kind of deal with it." And I kind of like the attitude. He's like, these aren't his words. I'm kind of paraphrasing, but he was like, "You can't sit around and mope about things. You just got to say, hey, this is a hand we're dealt. We're gonna make the best out of this situation." And today, somebody asked him, are you going to look into your process on things because you've had these injuries? And, Campbell just kind of blew it off. And I'm going to be honest, that's kind of how I feel, guys. Like, I don't think there's anything to look into. I think whoever asked that question might have been trying to dig for something that doesn't exist. James, let's start with you, then hear from Coach. Do you have any concerns or thoughts about this, or is this just kind of a nothing thing?
I don't think so. It's not a unique situation to the Lions. A lot of teams are having a lot of injuries now, and we saw in the Thanksgiving games, teams playing with short weeks had a lot of injuries, and everybody in the league is having a lot of injuries. I think it's a little bit worse on the Lions, and it's concentrated on the defense and the front seven in particular. which is what kind of makes it worse. But a lot of teams have a lot of guys out. We've gone through the injury reports over the weeks for teams, and a
Yeah.
lot of them have longer lists than the Lions. Uh, it just being compressed into hitting the defensive line so hard has made it a lot worse for Detroit, I think, than other teams. But I don't know about it being part of the process and how they train players or anything. A lot of these are just guys getting rolled up from behind and things like that, which is just kind of unavoidable in games.
Yeah, I don't see some sort of pattern or anything like that going on, Coach. You know more about this than James and I do from your coaching days. Weigh in.
Well, first of all, the stuff like this happens all the time. There's two things I see that people got to understand. The Detroit Lions, their defense line was harder than anything I've ever seen. Look at Pascal's injury. He was sprinting to the sidelines trying to run down Williams. And I watched 3-4 games today where I watched D linemen and the same thing, and somebody was running out, Lamar Jackson, and they kind of geared down to a jog. I'm not going to catch them. Pascal's keep going. So that's just the line. That's their mentality. That's part of it. The second thing is the NFL teams, the Detroit Lions don't train these guys a ton. It's not negative. I'm not saying they don't train them a ton, because when the off season is around, they're gone. They're not on the site. They're not training in the Lions facility. Some guys are, some guys that live in the area, Nowoski,
Yeah.
the guys that live in the area, they're training there all the time. Most of these bigger name guys, the guys that are making the big money and stuff, have their own trainers. They do their own stuff. Look at Derrick Henry, right? You guys have all heard
Yeah.
the story on what he does. So it's not the Lions. They're trained. I mean, if they're there, they're getting the job done. Their
Yeah.
strength guys getting the job done. But chances are, probably 60-70% of their lifting is out on their own somewhere else. And so,
Well,
and again, I don't want to quote those numbers because I don't know exactly, but that's just the way it is. So, yeah, they're going to, like Dan Campbell said, we're going to look into it, but they're going to look into the punt team from last week too. And they're going to look in. So everybody's always trying to drum up a little bit of, just a little bit of stuff to say, oh, the Lions are not training them right to be healthy. Well, Hutch, I mean, there should have been somehow that they trained Hutch's leg not to snap when he hit McNeil. So it's just the way it is. Football.
yeah, Coach Campbell said they might actually try and go harder in practice because maybe that's the problem. And then just so nobody took it out of context, I think his words were, I was being sarcastic or something like that. Like I wasn't being serious. So, okay. Time to look forward to that next opponent, the Green Bay Packers. We're going to start by hearing from a reporter who covers the team regularly. Here's my interview. I'm joined today by Lauren Helmbrook, sports reporter for the CBS affiliate WFRV TV out of Green Bay, Wisconsin. You can find her work at wearegreenbay.com. Lauren has also worked at NFL Films and pitched story ideas for HBO's Hard Knocks. Lauren, thank you for joining the show again.
Thanks so much for having me. I cannot believe how good the NFC North is this year.
Well, we said it was going to be the best division in football, and I guess that's part of our prediction that has actually lived up accurately to the hype, right?
It's just unbelievable. I feel like especially the Vikings have just found a way to win in games that it didn't seem like they were going to be able to. Obviously, here in the game leading up to this upcoming Packers Lions Thursday Night Football, all three of the top teams in the NFC North pull out a win, and I don't know. It's just the wild card is going to be filled with the North, is what I think.
I will be surprised if three teams, if the Lions, the Packers, and the Vikings, I'll be surprised if all three of them, if any of them miss the playoffs at this point. I'm expecting all three to make it.
Exactly. I feel the same way.
All right, well, let's learn a little bit more about how the Packers are doing. It hasn't been that long since they faced the Lions. The Lions beat the Packers, but since then, the Green Bay has won 3 straight. There was that close one against Chicago, but then against San Francisco and Miami, Green Bay won a little bit more comfortably, and Jordan Love did not throw any interceptions in those 2 games. So let's start with that most critical element under center. Is Jordan Love playing better, and what are you seeing out of him?
Yes, Jordan is definitely playing better. It's hard to know, though, because like we've joked in the past, he does kind of have that Brett Favre in him. And so sometimes you have to feel like, are we okay with a pick here or there if the Packers are able to win comfortably? But more recently, he hasn't thrown any, which is great because that's why the Packers did so well in the second half of last season. Was his touchdown to interception ratio was the best in the NFL. And so now if Jordan is on that similar trajectory, that just bodes so well for the Packers to try and stay in the hunt in the NFC North. So he's not thrown any picks against Miami. He threw 2 touchdowns and 1 interception. He had a passer rating of over 120, which is exactly what the Packers want. They don't need him to take over the game, but they want him to stay in control. The check down has been a really great option, especially with Josh Jacobs as such an active participant in the receiving game. And then Tucker Kraft as well. He's the king of yak, yards after the carry. He knows how to, yards after the catch, pardon me. He knows how to convert a 2-3 yard dump off into a first down. And so when Jordan has that option, instead of just throwing it away, instead of just hucking it downfield and hoping and praying, they've been successful. I also have to give some credit to wide receiver Christian Watson. A couple of times in the last few games, he has had to play defensive back. When a couple of those passes are a little errant, Watson's been able to, turn into a safety himself, kind of defend away from the secondary on the other team. But at the end of the day, you don't apologize for a win. You don't apologize for 0 interceptions, even if something should have been picked up. If it wasn't, it wasn't. Doesn't show up in the stat line, and the Packers still win.
Yep, that's exactly right. You do not apologize for a win. Now, Green Bay is top 5 in yards gained on offense. You've alluded to some of this already, but I would ask you, would you say the offense is different from when they last faced the Lions about a month ago?
I definitely would. I'd say the biggest change you would see is in the red zone. At one point, going into and halfway through this Dolphins game, the Packers were 9 for 9 in the red zone, converting with touchdowns. That was not the case earlier in the season and even in the first game against the Lions. The Packers really struggled with just scoring when they're that close to the end zone. And I'd say a big part of that is feeding Josh Jacobs. Crazy concept. One of the best running backs in the league probably should get the ball when you're really close to the end zone. I mean, he scored 4 1-yard touchdowns over a 2-game span. And yeah, it's not very exciting to go from 1 yard out, but at the end of the day, it's points on the board. Jacobs is really the workhorse that the Packers needed. He's, like I said earlier, a big factor in the pass game as well. He had 49 touches in this game against Miami. He's had over 100 yards over the last 5 games, yards from scrimmage. And he had a 3 touchdown game against the 49ers. I mean, Josh Jacobs is hitting his stride. And again, this is just football 101. When the run game is working, that opens things up in the pass game. It takes pressure off the quarterback. It makes the wide receivers more creative because they know that, hey, this defense is prepared for Josh Jacobs to just absolutely run all over them. So we might have a little leeway. I'd say that's a big change from the last Lions game is the continued use of Josh Jacobs.
That makes sense. And, it's a logical thing to do because when the Packers got him, I immediately saw him as an upgrade over Aaron Jones, even though I have a lot of respect for Aaron Jones and he's doing great things with the Minnesota Vikings as well. But Josh Jacobs was at a level that there's a reason he was one of the most sought after free agents this offseason. Well, injuries to Detroit Lions players on defense is well documented at this point. And so let me ask you this, as far as Green Bay goes, how are the Packers doing health-wise on the team overall?
So Green Bay is in the midst of playing 3 games in 12 days. And after the second game in 5 days, the Packers came out pretty healthy. Corey Ballantyne was the only major injury in the win over Miami. But Matt LaFleur spoke to the media on, I don't even know what day that was. I guess Friday. It's hard. The weeks are all backwards because the Packers are playing for prime time and Thursdays. But he spoke to the media on Friday, said Corey should be good to go. Earlier on Sunday, the Packers announced that Romeo Doubs was still in concussion protocol. He didn't play in the game against the Dolphins. And then Jair Alexander has been dealing with an injury as well. So those would be the major names. But realistically, I mean, Josh Jacobs is healthy. Jordan Love is healthy. Christian Watson is healthy. Xavier McKinney is healthy. The offense and defensive line are looking very strong. So all in all, the Packers are feeling good. A couple big names are still TBD for this Thursday night football matchup. And again, 3 games in 12 days. That is not slight, but given how much football is being played, the Packers are looking pretty healthy.
Yeah, no team is healthy 100% at this time of the year, so I want to check and see how they're doing. The Lions have that similar multiple games in a short window thing going right now as well. So let's flip over to defense here. Every NFC North team is in the top 11 in defense for points allowed. That is really incredible and not a shock considering how good the NFC North is looking right now. So what is the state of the Packers defense, and how are they looking right now? What's the strength of their defense as well?
So, I mean, you can't argue that the strength of the Packers defense is a lot about Xavier McKinney. And I'd say that changes the way that teams play the Packers, knowing that Xavier McKinney is tied for the lead in interceptions with Kirby Joseph, I believe. And so teams are playing the Packers differently. They're kind of playing more conservative because they don't want to try and attempt that deep ball, knowing that McKinney is there. And he knows that too. I can assume that's a little frustrating because you want to get those interceptions, but if you're just keeping a team in front of you, that's not a bad thing. So you'd look at the stats from the Dolphins game. Tua had pretty good numbers in that game. I mean, he had over 370 passing yards, and you'd think, oh, the Dolphins must have just completely dominated. It really wasn't that. They were just kind of playing short game in front of the Packers, and Green Bay was trying to minimize the explosive plays, which was something that they've struggled with in the past. Also, the Packers have been getting to the quarterback recently. Now, they played Brandon Allen with the 49ers, so that's hard to really quantify. He is a backup quarterback, and all due respect to backup quarterbacks, but that wasn't their starter. But the Packers have been getting to the quarterback, and the pass rush was a big problem. I mean, Kenny Clark earned his first sack of the season this past week. So when the Packers can get to the QB, obviously that pushes them back. And then if Green Bay's defense is just going to allow those more short game in front of them and kind of make sure the top doesn't come off, that's what's caused a lot of success for Green Bay in minimizing scoring. They've been great after half, keeping teams to maybe 3 points, maybe 1 touchdown after the break. So they're playing complementary football and just kind of keeping it in front of them.
All right. Well, last year we saw Detroit go into Lambeau Field and get a big win. And then Green Bay went into Ford Field and returned the favor. And that game, I think, surprised a lot of people here in Michigan. So, got a couple sentences I'd like you to finish for me. If Green Bay is going to win this game this week on Thursday, it is because
they keep Detroit in front of them. I'd say, just to the point I just made, Detroit is known for some explosive big plays, and they can play so quickly that you can get a touchdown in 30 seconds, in a minute, where suddenly the game gets out of hand. So by slowing the game down, keeping Detroit in front of you, you're not going to stop them from scoring. That's just not going to happen. But if you minimize the explosive plays, then I think the Packers can pull out a win because they can be in more control of the clock. I think this is going to be a clock game. I think this is going to be a tit for tat. You score here, we score there. But by not letting Detroit put 7 points up really quickly, then force a fumble and score again, and suddenly they're up by 14, that's where I think the Packers will find success if they're able to do that.
Okay, well, let's flip this around then. If the Lions are going to beat Green Bay, it's because what happens?
They forced turnovers. The Packers are known for forcing the turnovers themselves and converting points, but if the Lions are able to pick Jordan Love off 1 or 2 times, I don't know if there'll be enough possessions for the Packers to make those up. I think if the Lions are able to do a strip sack, do an interception here or there, that plays into what I just said. They'll score points really quickly, and then suddenly the game gets a little out of control.
All right. Well, the NFC North, as we mentioned, it's close. The Lions are 11-1. Vikings, after their win, are 10-2, and the Packers are 9-3. And they're all going to play each other again as well. You know, we expected this to be a close race. I expected it to be an improved division, as did you and most people. And I got to ask you, Do you have any thoughts? I mean, we're expecting all of them to make the playoffs, but do you have a feeling of who you think's got that path to winning the division, or who you're liking out of the three?
I have a hard time seeing things shake up a lot from where they are right now, just because we are in that latter third of the season. Obviously, it's ideal because the teams are going to start beating each other up a bit, which is a good thing. But I think that based on how things are going, the Packers could still beat the Lions in their, pardon me, in their matchup. And let's say the Packers beat the Vikings as well. That still means that both teams have at least one win over Green Bay. So it starts becoming a math equation of shared opponents and different things like that. And all three teams, if I'm correct, were, well, at least the Lions and the Packers were perfect against the AFC South. So that doesn't, it's going to be a math game. I really think it is, Matthew. One of those, oh, well, against common opponents played in the noon window, the Lions, it's going to be math. But I really do think even if the Packers win both of their games against the Lions and the Vikings, the math will still have the Lions winning the division, and then the Packers and the Vikings in the wild card. But nope. I'm not a mathematician, so if I'm wrong, someone can message me and tell me that I did it all wrong, and I'll be happy to apologize.
Fair enough. Yeah, I agree. I've already started looking at tiebreakers and stuff like that. Obviously, the Lions' defense is pretty banged up right now, and so it's going to be worth keeping an eye on how the backup players rise to the occasion, and those who are the starters, maybe rise to a level that they didn't play at early in the season, because they've been playing pretty well. As injuries have mounted, the defense has continued to fight. So it's going to be a fight to the finish, though. And that Minnesota Lions game the last week of the season might be just that much more impressive than we were thinking before the season started.
And the Packers will play the Minnesota the week before that. So
and you get the Bears in the final game, and you guys probably like that, but
Well, yeah, but you always get worried about a team that has nothing to lose. That's what happened 2 seasons ago.
Yes, it did. It did. And I think the Bears are going to try and play some spoilers for a lot of people because they're still a good football team.
Yeah, and I feel bad for Caleb Williams. I think he has a lot of talent, but just isn't always set up for success.
All right. Well, is there anything else that we should know or you'd like to share before we get out of here? Because unless these two teams meet in the playoffs, which could happen, almost did last year, this will be the last time I get to hear from you this season.
I'd say the Packers are in the midst of a lot of primetime games right now, and they think they're excited about that. This is the second of 4 straight primetime games with the option for that Vikings-Packers game to be flexed. So Green Bay's playing on the biggest stage in the time that matters, and the team views that as a compliment. They think maybe people didn't believe a lot in us at the beginning of the season, and that's why we were always in the noon window. But when the football really matters in November and December, the nation wants to see the Packers play. And it sounds like the team is ready to rise to that occasion. They don't view it as something they're nervous about. They view it as the privilege that they've earned with this 9-3 record.
Awesome. Lauren, thank you so much for taking the time and sharing all those Green Bay insights.
Of course. Thanks so much, Matthew.
Okay, guys, that was a great insight by Lauren. And now here's Coach Campbell.
They got players everywhere, and they're playing good football. So this is going to be a great matchup, back at our place. It's just another one of those, man, division game, number 4, get it back at home against a really good opponent. And it's there again, this is why you do it, This is why you coach, why you play. So we're fired up for this.
All right. I mean, Coach Campbell said it. They're fired up. And I got to believe that he's going to have them ready because he's going to remind them about last year, right? It doesn't matter how much you dominated them already this year, but we did the same thing last year, and this division race is super tight. And so we've got the Green Bay Packers offense, which is playing better right now against the Lions defense. That Packers offense is number 8th in points scored right now. They are 5th in total yards per game. Their rushing offense is better than their passing offense. So let's start there, James. What are we expecting out of the Packers offense?
Well, remember how people tried to peddle the story about how Jared Goff was not good under pressure.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, he's totally shaken that off in reality, but I think a lot of people still believe that. Oh, but the actuality of it is that that's what Jordan Love is,
Mhm.
or has been this season and in the recent past. He panics under pressure, and he leads the NFL in interceptions as a result. His completion percentage is under 50% when facing any pressure. So I think that the Lions, some of these moves, I think, kind of point to it, is that the Lions want to take away the run because Josh Jacobs got, I think, 95 yards and averaged over 7 yards a carry last time they played. So they want to take away the run and then concentrate on pressuring Love. And hope that that gets a pick or two. I mean, the Kirby Joseph pick six last week or last time they played, I mean, was the difference in a 24-14 win at Lambeau.
Yeah, that turnover was huge. If they can force that pressure onto Love and create the turnover, that will be big. The Lions are 11th in yards per game given up on defense, but they're third only in points per game. So again, we're seeing that the benefit of their great red zone defense there. Coach, what are you thinking you're going to see out of the offense for the Packers or the matchup for the Lions defense?
Well, there's a couple things. First, I'm gonna throw something at you guys real quick. I kind of alluded to talked about what James was talking about. Okay, we were up 24-3, and the weather was terrible. Golf doesn't play well in bad weather, right?
You're talking about the
Um,
first game this season against
yeah,
the
first game this
Packers.
year. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, yeah. And he already talked about it. We had a pick six by Kirby Joseph because that 48% under pressure completion rate showed reared its ugly head, and Joseph took that ball back to the house. Okay. All right. I'm going to throw a few more things at you because we've been talking about injuries, guys, right? I mean, guys, our injuries are really bad right now. In that game, when we played them, Rodrigo was out. Is Rodrigo out this week?
Yeah, Rodrigo's out. Yep.
Viking, right? Viking, is that how you say it? He
Sione
was out.
Vaki.
Viking, he was out. Okay. Pascal was out.
Yep, I remember that.
He was just got back from the doctors or whatever.
Yeah.
Wingo was out. Okay. JMO was suspended. Brian Branch got launched in the second quarter and was ejected. So,
Yeah.
it's funny because we think about that. I went back and looked at it. I'm like, God, this kind of sounds familiar. Granted, Anzalone, but and of course the other guys were still out. So I don't.
Sure. But it's a
I
great part that you bring up there is that, hey, the Lions were pretty shorthanded in a lot of areas when we played them the first time. Don't forget that, even though we are shorthanded now. And so, we're playing at home now, too.
Yeah, yeah. So the weather's not going to come into. So the weather's not going to hurt Jared Goff like it did then. Oh, that's right. It didn't hurt him then. It can't hurt Love because he's going to be indoors, but the pressure still can hurt Love. So I think we're in pretty good shape there. I feel good about that. So, anyways, let's talk about their offense real quick. So I kind of went back. I want to go back to what we did or what they tried to do against us last year. But I just kind of went back and looked at some different things because Love is good. I mean, we know that if he gets under pressure, he is leading the league. He's protecting the ball a little bit better. Is the pressure going to get him into a situation? So I kind of went back and I looked at his play action passes for the season is 25%. Okay. For the season, but against us, it was 15.4. And I know it's a smaller scale, but I was like, so then I said, well, you know what? I'm going to check something else. So I went and looked at the screenplay. So season average 13.7 screens. Okay. In the season average against us, it was 7.7. And again, it's a small sample, but my point is, what did they decide to do or decide to change on that? And I really couldn't find anything that was identifying what they were trying to do. Now, a lot of this could have came into play because of the weather. But if the weather's bad, would you not throw more screens and more short play action pass in that intermediate route than the deep ball? Okay, does that because you're gonna? So they didn't change to the elements. So it's going to be
Right.
interesting to see if they come back to those elements when they're on the field. So those are just, it was just weird looking at that, trying to go, where is he going to go with this? Now LaFleur is a great play caller. LaFleur, he designs up these exquisite run plays, which when I watch him, I go, man, those look familiar. But anyways, he does a great job in that, and he's fiery, and he's going to be excited and fired up about this game because he knows or thinks they got to come in and steal one. So, but again, bottom line, running game's good. They got those young receivers we talked about before. Tight end's good. We just got to pressure them, and we're going to be in good shape and see if they try to keep it in front of us. And we should be healthy. Did you guys hear anything on CD, on Davis?
I have not, James.
I haven't heard anything, but I think the assumption was that he was going to be back this week.
Yeah, okay, that's what I thought too.
But I haven't heard anything officially. Yeah, and to piggyback on what Jerry said, the Packers in the last game against the Lions targeted their running backs 8 times out of the backfield and got 6 completions. Not a whole bunch of yards or anything, but I mean, it was a definite part of their game plan going into that game. So I think we'll see that again. The middle of Detroit's defense is still in really good shape. Really, I mean, you got Aleem and Reeder in the middle playing excellent on the defensive line. Jack Campbell, I think, is playing at a Pro Bowl level at linebacker, and then Kirby and Branch is the best safety tandem in the NFL. So you've got that middle of the defense, like kind of like Tampa Bay used to have back in the day, when they had Lynch and Brooks and all those guys, and Sapp and stuff. If you take care of the middle, the outside can take care of itself. So I think that's a big bonus in all these injuries is that the spine of that defense is still pretty intact. I think they do have to stop Jaden Reed. They're gonna have to concentrate on him a little more. He had 5 catches for 113 yards last time against the
Wow,
Lions.
yes, he did.
And that, I didn't look. I bring that up. Good call on that. But also, if I remember correctly, 3, maybe 4 of the bigger, I'll say 3, let's just guess on 3, were when Brian Branch was out. Okay, because I remember saying to myself when they completed one of them, I'm like, well, if Branch was playing, he would have had that. Because I think Joseph was trailing on that one. And it would have been a branch coverage concept.
Yeah, I
Brandon
remember that
Joseph.
play.
Yeah.
Brandon Joseph. Yes, I remember that play because I'm like going, oh my God. And then I went, oh, it's Brandon. And I'm not talking down on Brandon Joseph because I love him. He does his job for us. But so I think that's a great call that they probably need to target him more, but I think they're going to have a harder time to do it with Branch.
Yeah, I think so. And and this is going to have to be a game that Branch is going to be fired up for because of what happened last time.
Yes. That's what I'm nervous on that one, guys.
Well, we're gonna need that secondary to do some stuff because Jordan Love's play has been getting better. I mean, the last 2 games he did not have a turnover, no interceptions, and so like James talked about, we got to get pressure on him. And you're right, James. I mean, with Za'Darius Smith and with DJ Reeder up front, amongst others like Aleem McNeil, you still have a great chance to get that pressure on him. And if that secondary can be the ball hawks that they are, I mean, you know that Kirby and Branch are talking right now thinking, man, neither of us got an interception last week. We need to make up for that this week. That's going to be a difference maker, slowing that run game down and forcing the passes up because that leads to more turnovers there, Coach.
Yep. And off of that, too, let's add Muhammad to that.
Yeah.
Because here's the reason, and this reason PFF had them at 5-4-4 pressures. Gen Stats had them at 8, 7, and 7. And I think if I remember correctly, it said that's the first time 3 defense linemen in one game have had 7 or more pressures each. Okay.
That's complementary pressuring.
Yeah, and when I read that, I'm like, because Jen's they're pretty spot on, and I'm not talking bad about PFF, but it just they're statistical, because they're breaking film down nonstop, and
totally.
And the NFL's partnered with them, so that it's big time. So.
All right, well, let's move over to the Lions offense against the Packers defense. As a no shock to anybody, The Lions are number 1 in points scored, averaging 31.9 per game. They're averaging almost 400 yards a game. They are 7th in passing yards, 3rd in rushing yards. Going up against the defense of the Packers. The Packers are 9th in defense for points scored. Their passing defense is 18th, while their rush defense is 8th. So let's start right there. James, what are you expecting out of the Lions offense going into this one?
Well, I think that the Lions will probably try to take something out of the Dolphins playbook last week, which was basically just avoiding the ball going anywhere near Xavier McKinney.
Yes, that's a smart play.
That's just what the Dolphins did. They just wherever he was on the field, the ball wasn't going there. So he had been their difference maker this year on defense, and the Dolphins were able to he just didn't have any impact on that game at all. Quay Walker is the guy that we remember from the season finale in 2022, who got a personal foul late in the game for obstructing the trainers trying to get on the field to help DeAndre Swift, and it got him booted from the game. But since then, he has gotten really better. He's matured and gotten really better as a linebacker. Hopefully, Jameson Williams can make the same kind of improvement from a young guy who makes some boneheaded mistakes. But last week, if you watch that game, they had him in man coverage on Tyreek Hill on multiple
Wow.
occasions. A linebacker on the fastest wide receiver in the NFL with the nickname Cheetah. and he didn't get burned like any of those times.
Wow.
It was something impressive. I was like, who is this number? I can't remember what his number is. A single digit number for a linebacker. So I was like, who is this guy covering Hill? And then I looked it up, and it's Quay Walker. And I was like, what? And so I think that the Packers have a pretty good defense.
They do.
But the strength of the Lions now, especially with the injuries, is their offense. So I think that the Lions' offense is better than the Packers' defense is, even though it's a pretty solid unit that they have out there.
Yeah, and you brought up Jameson Williams, and I want to bring him up because Coach pointed out he didn't play last game, and you add the weather element. I remember my uncle complaining that the Lions weren't taking shots far enough down the field for his liking, and I'm like, well, there's a guy named Xavier McKinney, and also the weather, and you don't have JMO. Well, you know what? JMO might be able to stretch that field a little bit more, even if JMO doesn't get a ton of targets. Just him pushing McKinney or Walker further off the thing is going to open things up for St. Brown or Tim Patrick. And so I'm looking forward to the JMO factor in this game, guys. I think that's going to be a big difference maker. And that's something the Packers defense did not have to handle earlier this season. And, that also would open things up for Sam Laporta, who had 2 touchdowns on some great play calls by Ben Johnson. So
yeah, off of that.
Go ahead,
Matt,
Coach.
Yeah, off of that. First game we played him this year, Goff was 2 for 3 at 10 to 19 yards. 2 for 3. He only threw. And then the rest of his passes were, of course, behind the line of scrimmage and 10 or less, in those medium runs.
They were short ones.
They were short ones. And that McKinney, I think, is one. And I think not having the JMO factor 2. And I think, and they're looking at the same thing that I'm looking at. And I think they'll, they're going to take some shots of that. But I think the Packers are probably working to say, oh my God, JMO's playing. We're going to have to change things up again. And like you just said, I think once JMO runs those clear outs, Patrick, look what Patrick's doing at our underneath routes right now, guys. It's not, and Laporta is, should hopefully have another big game, which we can go into that in a second.
For sure. Well, let's talk about the rushing game a minute, because I think the Lions are, they're going to want to get that rushing game going. And I'm looking online here. I'm on ESPN's site for this one, and they've got some guys with 11 games, some guys with 12. So I don't know that they've fully updated everything from this week. But if I'm looking at the number of yards carried, obviously Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry are the only 2 running backs over 1,000 yards. Jahmyr Gibbs and Josh Jacobs are knocking on that door right now. But what I want to look at is if you look at the top running backs, I'm going all the way down to the top 11 running backs. 10 of them, Jahmyr Gibbs is number 4 for total yards.
Mhm.
All the others have more carries than Jahmyr Gibbs does.
Mhm.
Okay. Now, Derrick Henry and Gibbs had the same average per carry going into this week, and Saquon Barkley was better than them. But everybody else has more carries. And Josh Jacobs has like 60 more carries than Jahmyr Gibbs. David Montgomery has 3 more carries than Jahmyr Gibbs. David Montgomery has like the same yards per carry average as Alvin Kamara. And he's got like 15 yards or 15 fewer carries. And I brought this up earlier this season, but guys, I mean, you want to be able to run the ball this time of year, and the fresher your legs are, the more effectively you're going to be able to do that. And I think you're going to start to see that here in the next 3 to 4 weeks. It's going to play a bigger factor because 221 carries versus 163, that's 2 to 3 games worth of extra carries that you've already been doing. And so I think the Lions are going to try and pound the ground game. And again, going into last week, Jahmyr Gibbs had more carries than David Montgomery did, but it flipped last week out of circumstance and whatnot, maybe also with the Bears. But that's going to give the Lions an advantage in this game, I think, because it'll give them both weapons to run inside, to bounce outside. They can play call based on what they're seeing from the Packers. And so I'm looking for the Lions offense to use the running game to attack in this one. James, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think they will do that. The other thing that having the running game going and establish the run early in that game is it's going to help keep your defense off the field.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's got to be goal number 1 for the Lions. I mean, they got a defense that's patchwork right now with 4 guys who are going to have like 4 practices maybe under their belts that are going to be playing snaps this week on a regular basis. So they're going to want to keep that defense off the field as much as possible. And the way to do that the best is to control the clock by running the ball.
Yeah, and that'll make Jared Goff's job easier at passing if they can do that. And James, you have an interesting stat on Jared Goff that you found.
Oh, yeah. There's only been 2 quarterbacks that have had 10-game winning streaks with 2 different franchises since 1950. Jared Goff and Peyton Manning.
Wow.
Not bad company.
No, but that's only because of the system Jared Goff is in and all the
Right.
players he plays with and the coaches who tell him exactly what to do, right? I mean,
Same as Peyton. Peyton is a painter. Peyton. He's not a quarterback. So systems works for both those guys.
There you go. All right, we got special teams. We got Jack Fox, the punter. We expect him to do Jack Fox-like things, which hopefully is just hold field goal attempts. But if he has to punt, we know he can do that well. And we got Jake Bates as our kicker, and he stabilized our kicking game. But the Packers have gotten a little bit of that as well, haven't they, James?
Yeah, them adding Brandon McManus to kicker has really stabilized their special teams. The last few seasons they've just kind of gone through a litany of kickers who haven't been great or even really NFL average since Mason Crosby retired. So Brandon McManus has really helped them out in that area. So hopefully the Lions defense is forcing them to kick field goals rather than get in the end zone. And they have to use McManus a little bit, but we'll see how that ends up.
Yeah, and hopefully they're long field goals too, just to lower the chances. And you never know. I mean, look at Justin Tucker, man. I mean, that guy is having a down season right now, and that's cost his team a few games. And so, but you're right, McManus has stabilized the Packers kicking game, and we'll just have to try and hold them to field goal attempts or keep them out of field goal range and force them to punt the ball. All right, let's move over to major storylines and the unexpected. Oh, one more special teams thing. Coach, you think Maurice Alexander is going to be returning punts again this week, or what are your thoughts on that?
He's gone.
Oh, they let him go.
They waived him. Yep.
Yeah,
and he didn't come back to the practice squad.
Yeah. I didn't see that.
They still could bring him back to the practice squad, but but I'm not sure. I don't think that they have yet. So it could be that they sign him to the practice squad and then elevate him because he's only been elevated from the practice squad. Actually, I don't think he's been elevated. They've just brought him up to the 53.
Right.
So he has all of his elevations left. The only player that the Lions are out of uh, elevations with this season is I'm trying to think of it, Zylstra,
Right.
but he's
All
on the
right, because
53 anyway, so it doesn't matter.
they got Tom Kennedy for one more elevation, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, yeah. Tom Kennedy's had two, so if they want him back there to fair catch, uh, then they can do that one more time.
But you could have Sione Vaki back there. But you're right. I mean, but good point though. The Lions could still bring Maurice Alexander back this week before Thursday and do an elevation. You never. That's just the way it works. Coach, what'd you want to weigh in on?
I'm not on. We're good with special teams. I want to touch one more base on their defense. I think with the JMO, here's a couple things that I picked up. They're 65% nickel, and we've shown what happens when people run a lot of nickel on us like that.
Yeah.
They're 53% of their blitzing concepts are 5-man, and then they'll do a simulation thing, 26, the 5-man on that. But 50, so that's another thing. But one of the things that I noticed, and I think it was different with the last game, but I'm going to look at it. Cover zero, they'll run a blitz rate 56 times in cover zero, which is they're going to bring McKinney down the box and try to pick somebody up. I don't think with JMO that they're going to run a cover zero on us. I mean, if they do, I hope so. So then the next rate from that is their cover one concept, which again, they're blitzing 46% of the time in that cover one concept. So it'll be interesting to see how we set that off. And because cover one is that, of course, that's the middle of the field is closed, but that's going to give us those deep routes with JMO and then those crossers underneath. So those were just a couple of things that I looked at and was curious to see if they'll do the cover zero, but I don't see it. I think they're going to go with that nickel, and I think they'll do 5-man pressures, and hopefully they get home because it didn't help them last time in the rain.
All right. Well, that'll be something to keep an eye on. Speaking of keeping an eye on things, there was a photo that was released online. Coach Campbell was asked about it, and I believe it was Jahmyr Gibbs who took a photo in front of a whiteboard with a bunch of writing on it. And when he was asked initially about it, Campbell said he didn't know about it, and it looked like there were like plays or lingo in the background of it. And then today, Coach Campbell was asked about it and said no comment, and was a very quick no comment, wanting to move on it from right away. So, James, let me hear from you first. You saw this picture. What did you notice? What are your takes?
I mean, the interesting thing was some of the names on there that you first notice off that they had plays named after Khloe Kardashian and Caitlyn Jenner and Julia Roberts. But I mean, the play calls themselves were the pass protections for the running backs. They were the pass protection assignments for running backs on certain situations, and the play calls were telling them in this situation that the tackle is going to be doing this, or if this play call is this. So it's like telling them what their responsibilities are in certain situations and play calls with the pass protection. So it's something that they're going to have to change the language on now because it's out there. So they're going to have to rename all those things and have everybody rememorize those things.
Well, so James, before I get to coach here, a couple things for you. One is, I mean, I don't know that you're a selfie king or not. I don't know how many selfies you take and you post online, but when you do a selfie, I mean, a whiteboard with writing on it, then that just doesn't seem like the world's greatest background. Any idea what might have inspired this photo?
Complete forgetfulness or
Yeah.
lack of awareness of your surroundings.
Yeah. I don't get it at all. It makes no sense. It wasn't like, I don't get it. Coach, so a couple things from you here, Coach. Obviously, like James said, they're going to have to change some lingo and whatnot. But here's another question is, does this help somebody understand more about the Lions' philosophy on things that they can't get from film alone by knowing some of these words, even if the Lions change the wording?
I think we've had that. I think there was a documentary on that on Netflix, but we won't get into that. Yeah, first of all, as a coach, and I know Coach Campbell is like, especially when I saw him when they asked him about it the first time and he had no clue about it. And he goes, well, I don't need to know about that. I better look into that. That stuff as a coach drives you crazy because it's just things you have to deal with that he's trying to get a defense together and sign free agents and stuff. He doesn't want to deal with some photo that's out on that's out on social media. That's the problem with social media with that. And again, the young guys, and you notice you don't, knock on wood, you don't see the veterans doing stuff like that, but the young guys are like, yeah, let's take this cool pic. J-Mo was at the state football game yesterday taking pictures with the Catholic Central kids. Awesome. Those are cool things, but you have to, your surroundings. Sometimes when they're younger like that, you have to take that 10-second rule where you think, is this a good idea? And again, I'm not sure what those calls are. I was going to go start looking at them and go, man, this might help with my podcast, but I'm like, I'm not going to do that. And some were just trick calls. Some are just things that have been written up for ages. Some of them may something that they throw out there. It's like, Little Giants. Okay. If I said Little Giants to you guys, do you guys know what that is?
I think you're going to do the annexation of Puerto Rico.
Yeah, close. Little Giants was the call that Mark D'Antonio pulled against Notre Dame in overtime when they faked it and threw the touchdown pass. It was called Little Giants. I remember that because I came back and, of course, I made my own. We had one at Glen Lake called Cedar Hills because it was all the guys that lived in the area around me, Finn and Peyton and Brady. And so, yeah, you don't want to have to change those things. The name is different, but when somebody could say, oh my God, they're running this. But again, if they're going to waste their time trying to decipher that picture, it's just like the fake. It's just like the trick plays. Go ahead and take your time and break that down. It's not going to hurt the Lions. Just stop making mistakes, young pups.
All right. I appreciate that insight there. James, anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, you could see that it kind of bothered Campbell when he got asked about it because at the press conference, because after that question, he walked off.
Yeah.
Like that was the end of the press conference.
Yeah.
So he was kind of totally blindsided by that, or you have the conspiracy theory that maybe the Lions put that out there.
You never know. I mean, you just don't.
He's got a good acting career. We've already seen it on the Apple commercial. So by walking off on the press conference, man, everybody's like, either he's acting great or he is really pissed.
I might keep bringing this storyline up for a while because I was against the grain as I know James was, and I think, Coach, you were just all about talent. But I just want to bring that 2023 draft up again because I heard something again today on one of the broadcasts as I was watching, I think, the Eagles game against the Ravens, and they talked about how running backs are no longer undervalued. People value them. Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs, Jahmyr Gibbs are the top 4 running backs in the NFL for rushing yards. Look at the records of those football teams, okay? Chuba Hubbard's number 5, so that goes against the grain a little bit, but he's like half of the offense on that team. Kyron Williams and Tony Pollard, again, those teams, not necessarily. The Rams are trying to, get healthy and get in the playoff push. But then you got Aaron Jones in there. After that, a good running team, a good rushing game does so many things. And I knew that from the beginning. That's why I was so happy when we grabbed David Montgomery. And then when you added a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs, if you can keep your defense off the field, like James, we talked about, run that clock down. And Campbell talked about it because they asked Campbell about it as well. And I want to say Campbell's ahead of the curve on this. I think that was what he always wanted to do when he got here. And to be able to run the ball and control it. And you see other people trying to do it, and they're like, oh, it's a new thing in the NFL. Well, Campbell didn't just start trying to do it. He wanted to do it with Jamal Williams and DeAndre Swift when he first got here and had those guys. And then, again, the linebacker. Imagine our linebacking core without Jack Campbell in that room right now. I mean, he's so vital due to the injuries. So, and then, you can go to the second round, and, I mean, the spoils we got there, right? But I just want to bring that up again because, oh, by the way, did I mention that Gibbs has more rushing yards than Bijan Robinson and he has a higher rushing average than Bijan Robinson. But you probably already knew that, James.
Yeah, I mean, teams started not valuing certain positions in the draft and in free agency and wanting to, their roster construction and how much money they were spending on from position to position. And they
Yeah.
started valuing positions like running back, tight end, linebacker, and safety as much. So what did Brad Holmes do? He went exactly the other way and was like, okay, well, if you guys aren't going to value these guys, I'm going to get the best ones at a discount. So I mean, you look at him drafting Campbell, Laporta, Gibbs, Joseph, and Branch at safety, in the second and third rounds. He's like, if you guys aren't going to draft these guys or value them, we will, and we'll make them, the backbone of our team. And so he took the discount, and it's paid off big.
Yeah, right. Grab the higher quality player at that position, or I mean, at that point in the draft versus going with that position. I mean, I get the theory behind it, where you want to have other guys at other positions who will have higher second contracts and get them, under contract control for the cheaper price. But as I've always said from the beginning, is if you got a good running game, the other team has a lot more to deal with. All right, well, another, I guess I'm going to call it a major storyline, is I think a key for the Lions the rest of the season is going to be their red zone defense. I think that's going to be really important because we've seen so many injuries to the defense right now. There's times the other team is going to move the ball down the field, whether it is a big play or they just march it down a bit. But as we've seen the Lions do, when we get in that red zone, we really make it difficult for teams because there's less space to work with, and we got a lot of guys who are good at finding the ball. So I just want to think that's going to be a key to being successful the rest of this season, Coach, is the red zone defense steps up. And it doesn't matter what happens between the 20s, and if we hold them to field goals, we can live with field goals. I mean, but you saw what happened with Arizona when they had to settle for field goals and couldn't get in their end zone. So you see that kind of being a big focus for the Lions?
Oh, for sure. For sure. I mean, and again, not giving up splash plays, not giving up the game changers. And we've done a great job of doing that. Hey, somebody gets a 25-yard catch. Okay. It's a 25-yard catch. It's not a 55-yard touchdown. And then, we take care because, when you get down the red zone, you got the 12th man, you got the boundaries and you got the back of the end zone. So, and I think you're right. I think that's going to be huge for us. And again, we have, it'd be nice to go through and check how many, turnovers we've created in critical situations this year, on the pick, especially with our safeties. How many big picks and how many big picks in that red zone have they done? And again, that's why our red zone scoring defense is so high. So
makes sense. And the other thing I want to point out here is the offense. They've done a great job. They put up some big numbers. There's going to be some times they're going to have to carry the team in the second half here. I still think our defense is going to, do some great things, and I do like what it looks better this year than last year, even with all the injuries. But we may have to win a shootout or two. And James, you got confidence in Goff being able to do that when the time's called?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. And this week, I think, is one of those games that could be a shootout. Green Bay's got a great offense. They've got 4 great receivers that all can do different things. I mean, Dontavian Wicks is totally a Detroit Lions type wide receiver who's a really good run blocker as well. People consider him to be the 4th receiver, but I think that the Packers value him more than that because of what he can do in other areas as well. So I think that this game totally could be a shootout.
All right. Well, the race for the division is on, you guys. Nobody's helping us. Nobody's been helping us for a few weeks now. The Lions are 11-1, followed by the Packers at 10-2. I mean, the Vikings at 10-2. The Packers are at 9-3. Vikings are on a 5-game win streak. The Packers are on a 3-game winning streak. That is for our division. In the NFC, we also have the Philadelphia Eagles at 10-2. They won again. So you got to win the division first. We did not. I don't think all those things went our way for us to clinch a playoff spot yet. I think one of them did require the 49ers to lose. I think they're playing right now. But 1 week at a time, take care of that. Coach, this is a really big game. And I know one game shouldn't be bigger than another, but this week is bigger than Buffalo. We can lose the Buffalo game, and it doesn't hurt so much because it's not a division game and it's an AFC game. And in addition to winning the division, we want the number one seed so we can get the bye and we can have a home field advantage. So this Packers game is going to be big. What are you seeing out of the division race? I mean, it's super tight, and the room for error is minimal for every team.
It is. And again, I'm going to go back to, what I've talked about the last couple of weeks. Take care of home field advantage. Take care of our home. Take care of Ford Field. If we take care of Ford Field, nothing matters. Okay. And that's the biggest thing. And I think that's, and I'll guarantee that's part of the message that MCDC is throwing at them right now. We're at home. Nobody comes into our house and takes it from us. Okay. If you're going to allow them to come in, I mean, what did Philadelphia just do? They went into Ravens' house and took it from them. And you don't think that's going to be on the board all week? Look at the Ravens. Ravens best offense in the game. Ravens the best team. He's the best quarter. He's the MVP. Lamar Jackson's throwing the ball better. Oh my God, they got Derrick Henry, the 300-pound running back. He's the best. Philadelphia went in there and hit him right in the mouth. And that's it. Dan Campbell's bringing that up, and I guarantee the guys and those guys watched it. You're guaranteed that the Lions watched it. Let's say had some practice at that time, and so I think that's it. Take care of the home, and everything will take care of itself. Take care of the little things, and the big things will take care of themselves.
All right. Now, James, I know I've hit on a couple things you wanted to bring up, but I also want to ask you, in addition to this, I agree with Coach. You got to win the games. Just win the home games, keep going. But the Lions have won 10 games in a row. I mean, they're 11-1. How many games do we need to win to get home field advantage? Is it going to got it just 14-3? Does that get it done? I mean, I don't know if we know that magic number, but what are you seeing out of this division race and then I guess a conference race at this point?
Yeah, well, the Dolphins, Cardinals, and Ravens didn't do us any favors this week. I was kind of hoping that at least one of those would come through the Lions' way and eventually kind of chip away at these teams being right on their heels, especially with all the injuries, and the risk that the Lions have the next few games of maybe dropping one or two. But I was looking at the remaining schedules for the Vikings and the Packers, and they don't have a lot of cupcakes on their schedules the rest of the way either. They have definitely some games where they're going to be favored, but I was looking at all their schedules, and every one of those games is losable for the Vikings and Packers the rest of the season. It's not like they're not playing, a team like Tennessee, or New England or anything like that. It's all they're playing a lot in the division, and then they're playing a lot of other pretty good teams outside of the division. So I think that everybody in the NFC North, those top three teams, is going to lose a couple of games maybe down the stretch here.
Yeah, and right now the Lions are 7-1 in the conference. Philadelphia is 6-2, and so I mean, again, that's a conference tiebreaker. Winning those games on the road in Minnesota and Green Bay were huge. If the Lions can win this game here this week, it will go a long way to securing the division. Not securing, it doesn't secure because the division title could come down to week 18, the 17th game, where the Lions host the Vikings. I mean, it could come down to that game, the way the Vikings are playing as well. But like you said, we all got to play each other in here, and Green Bay and the Vikings play each other again, I believe, and someone's got to lose that game unless they tie. And, I know people root for ties. I feel like ties go against you, though, because then nobody gets a loss. So, okay.
Yeah. And those never happen hardly at all either. So all those scenarios you see where it's counting on ties, I'm like, what are the odds that those are ever going to happen? There's maybe one tie a season in the NFL, maybe. So the fact that the NFC North teams are going to kind of beat up on each other a little bit this season, goes back to what we talked about before. The team that we're really worried about is the Philadelphia Eagles as much as anybody. And their schedule down the stretch is not hard. Carolina, Pittsburgh is a hard game, obviously. Washington should be a decent game, but then they end with Dallas and the Giants. Those are, three of those games are ones that they should go in as double-digit favorites.
Yeah, I know that Pittsburgh game, we're all going to be Steelers fans. I know Coach was like, I watched all these games rooting for people this week to help. I am doing that again. Well, I think we're all going to be Steelers fans that week because we want one more loss for the Eagles there, just because we want that number one seed.
I'm gonna roll with my boy Cooper Kupp's gonna upset him, the Cowboys. I'm just saying.
All right. All right, guys, we need to wrap this thing up. It's going a little long. It's been a great show, but we need to get things closed up here. The ref report, there isn't one this week because assignments have not been released. It's a Thursday game. So, last couple things. What's it going to take for the Lions to win this game? James, let's start with you.
They got to stop the run. If they can take the run game at least partially away from the Packers, then they can start throwing extra pressure at the Packers. They can start blitzing Jamal Adams, blitzing Quan Alexander, bringing some other linebackers here or there, Trevor Nowaski, and bringing some guys in addition to the defensive line. If they can put them in negative game script behind the sticks by taking that run game away from them.
All right. Coach, how about you?
We have to outrush them substantially. We really have to pound it on the ground, I think. And again, that's going to take the time off the clock, which keeps Love on the sidelines and helps us, control the clock, which, if we can run the ball well, we're going to score some touchdowns. We didn't have a rushing touchdown last week, did we?
No, we had 2 passing touchdowns.
Yeah, we had 2 to Laporta. And I think I did say Laporta was going to have a big game last week. I just wanted to bring that up. But I think I said he was going to have 8 receptions. I'm going to go with the 8 receptions this week.
Okay. Ooh, that'd be a big number for him this year. So, all right. I guess stopping the run, James, will force them into the pass, which would help us get more pressure on Love, which could help create more turnovers. I think whoever wins the turnover battle in this game is the team that wins the ball. It wins the game. And I guess that's what it's going to take. And I guess that falls right into my predictions is the team that wins the turnover battle will win the game. I think it's going to be crucial in this one. That was the difference last year when we lost to them was the turnovers. So I'm going to go with that. The other prediction I'm going to put out there is I think J-Mo's going to have a big game. I think you're going to see a great game out of J-Mo in this one. And I think that could be the difference maker. They didn't get to see him last time, and the weather's going to be different because it's indoors. All right, Coach, how about you? Any predictions?
Just the one with Laporta. I think he's going to have a big game for us on those under routes, and which will open up J-Mo and the rest of the group.
All right, James, how about you?
I think that those 4 new bodies they're going to have on defense are going to combine for at least 10 tackles. Because I think that they're going to bring those 2 big defensive ends in, and they're just going to platoon them at left defensive end to have that set that edge. So I think those guys are going to play a lot in this game, and then brings Zadarius Smith off the other side. And I think Jamal Adams is going to have a role. I don't know how much it'll be necessary in this first game because he's going to have 3 practices maybe at most under his belt before Thursday, and one of those will just be a walkthrough. So he's going to have 2 real practices. So I don't know if Adams is going to play a ton, but if his role is just what Iffy's was last year anyway, it's go get the quarterback. We're going to blitz you from safety and go get the quarterback. So I think that he could step in and play right away. And then Quan Alexander, I think, could definitely have a role too, especially if we get them into those, if we take the run away and get them into those passing situations. That's his thing as a pass covering linebacker. You could see him on Tucker Kraft quite a bit.
All right. Well, I've got one more prediction before we get out of here. I'm going to predict Coach loses his voice at the game on Thursday. If you don't, Coach, I'm going to say why not, because we need that home field advantage. I'm expecting Duke and the others that are joining you to do the same. Safe travels down there. Can't wait to hear about the atmosphere, all the extra stuff as well as your in-game observations. James gave us those from Indianapolis a couple weeks back. So, Coach, James, thank you both for being here. Folks, thank you so much for tuning in. You can find more episodes and content at notthesameoldlions.com. Tell your friends and family about the show. Like and comment on socials. Please subscribe regardless of your listening platform. And until next time, stay gritty, my friends.
If you're a maintenance supervisor for a commercial property, you've had to deal with everything from leaky faucets to flickering light bulbs. But nothing's worse than that ancient boiler that's lived in the building since the day it was built, 50 years ago. It's enough to make anyone lose their cool. That's where Grainger comes in. With industrial-grade products and dependable fast delivery, Grainger can help with any challenge, from worn-out components to everyday necessities. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.